Conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Otto.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance. And now your hosts, Joe Otto and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. As always, my name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto.
And today we're going to talk about a topic that we've talked about in the past, but there's been some developments, especially in New York. It's this idea that if you're a leftist and you're a protester, you're allowed to go out in the streets shoulder to shoulder. There's no problem with it. If you just want to go about your life, all of a sudden the coronavirus lockdown requirements are still in effect. If you want to go out and protest Black Lives Matter, you're fine. If you want to go to a Trump rally, health officials in Tulsa, Oklahoma are now concerned about people rallying for the president. So it's ludicrous to think. We were told that you can't go outside, you can't get close to people because you could catch the virus, you could spread the virus, right? But now we're actually being told through their acceptance of these protests and their crackdown on protests that they don't like or activities they don't like, we're being told that the virus discriminates based on your ideology. So there's a really interesting thing going on in New York City, and by interesting I mean tyrannical. Mayor Bill DeBlasio has been waging a months-long campaign against the city's Jewish inhabitants. He's put out tweets. I think we have one of the tweets. Let's go to image number 1. This was Bill de Blasio's tweet back in April. My message to the Jewish community and all communities is simple. The time for warnings have passed. I have instructed the NYPD to proceed immediately to summons or even arrest those who gather in large groups. This is about stopping disease and saving lives, period. Usually when a politician starts his tweet out with my message to the Jewish community, it's not all that surprising that what follows ends up being incredibly anti-Semitic. But what we're seeing in New York is we're seeing that protests are okay, but if you're in a Jewish community, if you're in a Jewish neighborhood, and you even want to send your kid to a park, you're being vilified, you're being kicked out of the parks. It's insane.
Not just in April, it's happening now.
Yeah,
right?
That's happening right now. This was
this just happened. So for those of you that think that this is, they panicked during March and April and parts of May, and even though they said that we were going to have our Pearl Harbor moment and 200,000 people and 2 million people were going to die, so none of that happened, right? None of that happened. Now we're to the point where protesters go out in the street, there's no spikes, and we're dealing with them. Max, they're actually welding gates shut.
Yeah. So
to the park, so the kids can't play.
Yeah. So let's play the clip. We'll play the clip of the welding, and then I'll show what that was in response to. Let's go to cut 2.
Wow.
Incredible. They're actually welding the gate to the park closed, and obviously you can fix that later, but that's a very permanent. That's not a temporary solution. That's considered to be a permanent solution to close the park. I want to play this clip because this happened earlier that very same day. This is members of the Jewish community deciding that, okay, if it's okay to protest, then it's okay for our kids to use the park. This is them actually taking bolt cutters to the locks and reopening the park themselves, which forced or caused DeBlasio to go on this tirade. Let's go to cut 1.
Open it up wide. More wide.
So
wow.
That is them taking the bolt cutters to the locks and reopening the park. DeBlasio responded by actually kicking them out of the park. I think we might have footage of that too. We do. Let's go to cut 4, and then we'll talk about it. Yeah, there's no sound, so that's them being kicked out of the park.
Why'd they leave? There's enough of them. Why'd they leave? Why is civil disobedience a bad thing? Why?
Yeah, I don't know. There's no audio to that clip, but the police are there. The police are forcing them out of the park.
We pay taxes. 30% of our pay goes to these clowns.
Well, more in New York. In New York, it's more. In New York, it's much more. It's much more. And it's crazy.
We are being treated like children. We are treated like 5-year-olds. They act like they know what's best for us. We know what's best for us. Like, we're all grown men and women. We know what's best for our kids. You know what, Max?
Yeah.
We lose everything we have and we watch it happen. While we watch these little punks and clowns destroy and deface things, and then the mayor of Seattle comes out and says, "We've come to an agreement."
Yeah, instead of 6 blocks, the Chads is going to be reduced to 3 blocks.
3 blocks.
Imagine that. That.
I wonder if they went and asked the people in those 3 blocks. I wonder if they asked the people in those 3 blocks. Hey, what do you think?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. You have insurrection in your city, and instead of taking back your city, you say, okay, the best I can do is to give you half. Right? They literally met them halfway on people who've taken over parts of the city. It's insane. And then you see this in New York. I want to play this clip. This is Bill DeBlasio explaining why he forced all of those Jewish children out of the park and then welded it shut. Said that he can't have people taking the law into their own hands. Let's go to cut 5.
And cutting these locks open. So your reaction to that, and is the city just going to show up and close them again? And are you going to have to clean them up? What's the process here?
Yeah, we're not going to allow people to take the law into their own hands. It just doesn't work.
No,
so
unless you're a protester.
People are not allowed to
not
open
a
up a playground that's
rioter.
not yet available to the public. It's for a reason. Look, I was very sympathetic in the beginning to every parent, as a parent myself, why people wanted to be on those playgrounds. We tried to make it work. It wasn't working effectively. Right now, we're not going to make a change with the playgrounds until we get to phase 2.
So saying that's phase 2. You can't do that to phase 2. He says taking the law into their own hands. I highly doubt there is anything in the law to give Bill DeBlasio the power to weld a gate of a park shut. I have a really hard time believing that he has that legal power. I have a really hard time believing it.
He doesn't have the legal power. But he has as much legal power as we let him get away with. You know, here's the problem. The real people that should be out protesting, the you, the me, the millions of Americans that are sick and tired of the government actually putting their fingers of oppression on top of us, we should be the ones out there protesting. You know what we're doing, though? We're working while these clowns are taking 30% of our pay and telling our kids that they can't actually play at a damn park. That's reality.
Yeah. And would you believe it if I told you that Bill DeBlasio's daughter was arrested at a protest and that he and his wife said they were proud of her? So she's out defying the social distancing guidelines, and he says he's proud of her. But when a Hasidic Jew in New York wants their kid to use a park, he sends in his thugs to kick them out, and then he sends in the city workers to weld the gate shut. It's insane. And would you believe it if I told you that over the weekend there was a rally in New York? I think it was in Brooklyn, but it was in New York. 15,000 people are estimated to attend. And it wasn't for Black lives. It was for even a smaller subset. It was for Black trans lives. It was a protest for Black trans people. 15,000 people shoulder to shoulder. Not a peep from the mayor. Let's play that. Let's go to cut 3.
I believe in our power. I believe in Black trans power.
This is unbelievable.
Thank you.
Wow.
I believe in Black trans power. I don't know what that means, but I don't want to get into that. These people are literally defying the same orders that Bill de Blasio said had to be strictly enforced. There were no police there welding the gates to that park closed, that plaza in front of the museum.
Well, and there's no spikes happening, right? They said, "Oh, there's spikes happening everywhere. Nobody's dying."
There are spikes. There are spikes in New York. But listen to this: in New York, the contact tracers who are sent out to investigate, the contact tracers are not allowed to ask whether someone attended a protest. So they aren't actually looking to try and get to the truth of the spike that they're seeing in certain areas of New York. They're not allowed to trace it back to a protest. Now, for
Max,
what I understand,
no one is
dying.
Very few people are dying of corona.
That's not true. That's not true that no one's dying.
Okay, very few people. I just corrected myself. Very few people are dying of coronavirus right now. Very few people.
There's a large amount of people dying. There are still people dying. It is not the majority of people who get the coronavirus, but there are still people dying. What you have in New York is, I understand the whole thing that says, okay, if you got the virus from a protest, there's no way we could possibly trace all of the contacts that you had. I get that. But the other side of it is that they don't want the protest to be linked to the uptick in cases, the uptick in hospitalizations. They'd much rather be able to say that it's the reopening of the society that did it, reopening of businesses. They don't want to have that evidence. So the contact tracers aren't allowed to ask whether someone attended a protest. What the hell?
Why are they not allowed to ask?
Actually, yeah, they're just not allowed to ask. Why? It's one thing to say that we're not going to investigate protest contact tracing because it's impossible. You have no idea who you came into contact with. It's another thing to bar the investigators from even asking about it. It is obvious, it is clear that they don't want that link made, because that clip we just saw, the 15,000 people in front of the museum in New York protesting for black trans lives, they're fine. They can do what they want. But God forbid a handful of children go into a park. That park gets welded shut and the kids get kicked out. It is insane. It is obvious. And yesterday, here's the crazier part about this, Joe. They did that to the Hasidic community in New York the same day that a lawsuit was filed against New York City for discrimination. Orthodox Jews and actually Catholic priests joined together to sue the city of New York for discriminatory enforcement of the coronavirus guidelines, saying that it is ridiculous that you are encouraging protests but making it illegal to go to church or illegal to go to synagogue. So the same day that the city of New York got sued for discrimination, the mayor is sending them out to weld the gates shut of a park in a Hasidic neighborhood.
Yeah.
It is obvious that this is discrimination. It is obvious that there are other motives at play here. And to call this anything else other than an anti-Semitic power trip, that's exactly what it is.
Look, I don't know how we and I mean, I know that it's a power trip and I get it, and you talk about people dying, so I just decided I'd go look at state by state how many people are actually dying, and then compare it against people that die of pneumonia or the flu or things during that same period. And the spike is literally like 1.5, 1.8% above what it would be normally if you just had pneumonia and the flu going into the same season. 1.8%. So there is not more people dying. There's not 400 people dying of the flu in New York and another 400 people dying of COVID. That's not what's happening. Right?
No, but there are still people dying.
It doesn't matter if there's people dying. People die every day. The reality of it is that I'm not going to sit here and let them say that that there's this mass amount of people dying of coronavirus today, because it's not true. It's not true. It's not true. Everyone else has died of nothing. They're not dying of anything. Everyone's dying of corona. Everyone. Right? The standard by which they actually say people are dying of corona is the thing that I have the biggest problem with, because we can't actually tell if they're telling the truth. That's my problem. So I don't. Yeah. I actually don't. I think I think everyone should be able to just go about their business, live their lives, figure it out, herd immunity, and if it works, great. And if it doesn't, if you're not willing to take the risk or you're at a high risk, stay home. Really simple. But what they're doing what they're doing to these, by putting people in a box, putting children and say you can't go outside. I watched a guy down the street walk with a mask on his face, walking down the street by himself, and I'm thinking to myself,
all alone.
You're a moron. Who are you going to catch it from? A blade of grass?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's going to blow from halfway across the country, and it's going to hit you, and you're going to get coronavirus. It's pathetic, Max. It's pathetic.
Yeah.
The whole thing is pathetic. Bubble wrap mentality.
Yeah, it's the data is suggesting that the coronavirus pandemic is only the fourth worst flu pandemic that we've had, and yet it's the only one where we've destroyed the economy over it, where we've ruined livelihoods and lives over it. The only one I know of where they welded the gates shut of parks in New York. The only one I know where they criminalized funerals. My wife, a member of my wife's family, passed away not too long ago, in the last week or so. I think a couple weeks ago, and he lived in New York. And they were allowed to bury him, but they weren't allowed to have a funeral.
Right.
Because New York said that they're not allowed to have funerals. It's just prohibited. Too dangerous, they said. When the same Jewish community in New York held a funeral in April, that was that tweet that DeBlasio sent out. And here's a headline from the New York Times. Let's throw up image number 2. Bill DeBlasio actually forced the crowd to disperse. They had a Hasidic funeral for a beloved rabbi in the community, all outside. That was criminalized. They were forced to disperse, right? They were threatened with arrest because they were going out to basically show their respects to a community leader who had passed away. That was criminalized. That was considered to be taking the law into their own hands. As DeBlasio said. Let me show you this clip from a week or so ago. This is Bill DeBlasio at a George Floyd memorial service, surrounded by people. He doesn't have any problem with that. Let's go to cut 8.
Racism in this society causes we need to do more. We will. So it will not be about words in this city. It will be about change. Change in the NYPD. It will be about change that you can see and believe, because you will see it with your own eyes. That's what we must make. Anything short of that is not enough. We will make peaceful change in this city once and for all. Keep fighting for that change. To the Floyd family, we stand with you. Black lives matter in New York City. Black lives need to matter in America. Thank you to the Floyd family, and God bless you.
And not one person was even listening to him. Did you realize that? They didn't cheer for him.
No, they were listening to him. They were booing him. Let's listen to video caught from the back of that memorial service. Let's go to cut 9.
He's a pretty popular guy.
So he's getting booed. He's at the memorial without a mask on. He's not social distancing. He's breaking all of the rules that he forces other people that he doesn't like to have to comply with. But for him, it's different. For Black Lives Matter, it's different because that's a cause worthwhile. It's not worthwhile for the Jewish community to mourn the passing of a local rabbi. That is no bueno. But if he wants to go out and basically have a memorial service for someone who was killed in Minnesota, realize this. George Floyd, what happened to him is horrible. It happened in Minneapolis. The fact that there was a memorial service being held in New York, there's really no actual reason that needed to happen, right? And I support everyone's right to do whatever they want to do, right?
Right.
You have the right to hold a memorial service, but you can't tell me that a memorial service in New York City for a man who was killed in Minneapolis is essential, but a funeral service for a rabbi who died in New York is non-essential. You can't make that argument. There's no logic there.
Well, logic would imply that we're actually in a logical world today. You know, I talked to a friend of mine. You know, I spend a lot of time, people call me from all over the world, and they say, hey, Joe, what the heck is going on in the U.S.? And I go, well, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, it's kind of a mess. I mean, what's happening in Seattle? And I go, I have no idea. What are you talking about? What's happening in Seattle? This is all normal. This is all normal stuff. Like, in your country, this happens every day. And they're like, yeah, but it's not supposed to happen in the United States. That's why we want to come to the United States, because you guys are logical. And you see things from that make sense. He goes, but I can't see anything that you're doing that makes sense. What is this? And I go, well, actually what's happening is that there are 300 million people in the United States that are sensible, and you got 30 million that are a bunch of goofballs, and the goofballs are in leadership, and the goofballs work for the government, and the goofballs are entitled little dirtbags that want to run around the streets and act like anarchy is the way to do it while they put topsoil and human feces on top of cardboard and try to grow fruit out of it, right?
Try to grow basil.
Yeah, I mean it. And I go, look, the problem is who has the mic? Somebody got to pick up the mic. The crazy idiots got to pick up the mic. The people that have no business being in leadership got to pick up the mic. DeBlasio is an absolute moron. How we got to that position, I have no idea. I have no idea why we elect dirtbags into our government, into our leadership at every level. They just seep in. They wake up and they go, I want to be a politician because I want to be popular. I want to be well-liked because in high school, I got my head thrown into lockers. I don't know. Maybe that's it. I feel like we're back in middle school and somebody's running for class president and they're going, I'm going to open up all the soda machines in the lunchroom, free soda for everyone, just to win, knowing that you actually can't get it.
In the teacher's lounge. Everyone gets to go in the teacher's lounge. Things they can't actually do.
And everyone gets straight A's, right? So your parents will be proud of you, but we're not going to give you any homework. It's like that. That's where we're at. Yeah. We are actually, you know why they treat us like 5-year-olds? Because they can't believe they got into office with the garbage that they make promises to us about. They can't. They go, wow, hey, they fell for that. Let's try this. Hey, everyone, if you vote for me, here's what's going to happen. If you're bald, you're going to grow hair. You're not going to need that hair treatment anymore. You're going to grow hair. That is the equivalent of what we're seeing. It's lunacy. We're dealing with lunacy. You had people, I don't want to go back to Seattle. You had people that literally toured the Chaz, Choppy Chaz, whatever you want to call it. They toured it saying, this is a peaceful place. Oh, everyone, peace, love, and happiness. This is what it's supposed to be about. Right? That's what they said. Yeah. As they're walking by buildings that are graffitied and burned out cars and it's destroyed. But everyone's for peace, love, and happiness. And they don't mention what's happening at night. Right?
I was watching a video of someone who was filming it. And someone just came up to them, took their phone, and threw it on the ground and walked away. And they start crying and screaming for police. Sorry, if you have an autonomous zone and you chase the police out, I don't want to hear any tears when you get your phone thrown on the ground.
I wish they'd try to do that to me. Maybe I should go to. I think I should go to Seattle, the autonomous zone. Who wants me? Who on this podcast wants me to go to Seattle? Who wants me to go to Seattle? I'm thinking I might go to Seattle. Max, I might go to Seattle.
I'm not going to Seattle.
I'm going. I might go to the Chaz zone. I might go.
The only reason I don't want to go there is because I think you're underestimating just how dirty and stinky these people are.
I have a hazmat suit. I can buy a hazmat suit. I'll be good to go. I just want to know. I just want to know
Joe,
who
they're using human manure to plant their gardens.
Yeah.
The smell. I will not go there just for the smell alone.
Well, not even that, but the E. coli, the type of bacteria you're putting in the body. I mean, it's just.
Yeah, that's the smell. When you smell something bad like that, that's the bacteria at work. That's what you're smelling. Ugh. No, these people were dirty to begin with, and I can only imagine what happens when they've been going a week or so without a shower.
Connor says, I do. I want you to go. Please go. Please go to the autonomous zone. All right, Connor, you're going with me. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah, I wouldn't wish that on my enemy.
I think look, this is like actually seeing a pink unicorn get born, right? It's like a once in a lifetime deal. We get to go to the autonomous zone.
I thought you were about to say seeing a pink unicorn get burned. That's what it sounded like you were about to say.
No, born. I was going to say something else, and then I stopped myself. And I think that I should go to the autonomous zone. I think that I should go. I think we should go live, Max, from inside of the Chazistan.
Yeah, if you want to go, you can be our correspondent in the field. And
Connor said he's in. He'll go with me. I'm going. I think we should go.
I will stay in the studio where it smells nice. It's air conditioned. I want nothing to do with the chat.
We can describe the smell to people and tell people it smells like flowers.
And then Joe, do you have a passport? Do you have an up-to-date passport?
I do have an up-to-date passport.
Are you sure?
I
do you have
think
enough?
I do.
Do you have enough pages? Do you have enough pages for the stamps?
Is there
There's a lot of stamps to get into
in
Chaz.
that 3 weeks or in that 3 blocks? Are they going to have an autonomous zone embassy? Like, are they going to have a Chaz embassy?
I think the funniest
just-
thing
I'm
is
just
when
questioning.
they put out the press release telling people to stop setting up autonomous zones within the autonomous zone.
This is crazy.
We don't even know how many autonomous zones there are. So you need a passport if you're going to go there. You're going to need fresh drinking water because anytime you go overseas, you never want to drink the water. You're going to need fresh drinking water. It'd be
Yeah.
good to bring some snacks because the homeless people stole all their food.
Hey.
You probably should go on hydroxychloroquine just to be safe.
And did you hear? Did you also? I want to know. Do they have tents that you can have like hotels? I just want to know if the tents are. They have a hotel.
No, but what people have been doing is they've just been stealing the tents from people. So if you want a tent and you don't have one, the practice in the Chaz is just to take the tent that someone else has.
Max,
So you
don't
can always
forget
do
your hand sanitizer.
Oh yeah. Don't forget the hand sanitizer, Joe. These are, as I said, these are very dirty people.
I told you I have a hazmat suit. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah,
I got a
I don't know.
hazmat suit. I'm gonna walk in there with a Darth Vader hat on, right? We're gonna go live from the Chaz. No, I'm serious. We're doing it. We're doing it.
Go
Max,
for it.
when do you want to do it?
Go for it.
But
I'm
I
not
have to
going.
do it
I'm
on the
not going to
weekend.
Chaz.
Well, I think you should go to the Chaz. Actually, you're having
No.
a baby. You can't go to the Chaz. You'll come back
Here's
with
the
all
thing.
sorts of stuff.
Here's
Your
the
wife
thing.
will kill you.
You're going to tell me to go to the Chaz. I'm going to show up and you're going to be like, yeah, I decided not to go, and I'm going to be left in the Chaz.
No,
I'm not
no,
doing
no.
that. I'm not interested in that.
I'm not letting you go. I got one. Connor's going with me. I just saw Connor
I'll
said,
be there.
I'll go with
I'll
you.
be there.
Game.
I'll be there on my phone. I'll be like, where are you? Like, I'm a couple blocks away, and you'll be sitting at home eating potato chips, and I'll just be in the Chaz all by myself.
Just the
why I'm not
idea.
going to the Chaz.
Just the idea of what could happen if you were in the Chaz. Oh, so
Yeah,
Max,
it's like locked up abroad. I don't want to be one of those people.
it's just
It's a
Josh is over
it's
here
a lawless
crying.
wasteland.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's a wasteland. They say that it's a beautiful place. Like there's beautiful stuff happening there.
They're
And
literally spreading human feces all over the ground. It's a wasteland.
you have but you have the Razachaz too. Raz,
Yeah.
the warlord
Well, here's
of
the
the
interesting thing.
Chaz.
Here's the interesting thing. I was gonna bring it on, but I didn't think we were gonna talk about it. Raz is the warlord, right?
He's the warlord.
He's been videotaped handing out guns to
Guns. Yeah.
people. Yeah. So we've been having this conversation. Is Chaz actually autonomous? If Chaz isn't autonomous, if Chaz is still part of Seattle and still part of Washington, he's not allowed to hand those guns out without a background check. The
Yeah.
only way he can hand out the guns, I've looked through it. I've crossed the T's, dotted the I's. The only way he could legally hand out guns would be if he was cohabitating and in a gay relationship with the men that he's handing out the guns to. Here's the problem. Raz, the warlord, is notoriously homophobic.
Oh boy.
They have him on video shouting like gay slurs at people. So the only way for him to legally have handed out these guns is to be in a gay relationship with the people he's giving the guns to, but he's homophobic, so he'll never admit that.
This
So
is getting really awkward.
He's in this catch-22.
This is getting awkward.
There's no way for him to legally hand out the firearms. He broke the law.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Well, that's a good way to segue into
Yeah.
the sponsor for today's podcast. It is again the Conservative Daily Story. Yesterday we highlighted our Invade Chaz t-shirts. Today we're highlighting our leftist definition of racism.
I love
basically
this
right out of
one.
the dictionary.
Love
Racist,
this
it
one.
has a pronunciation guide, it's a noun, and then it says, anyone who defeats a liberal in a political argument. Synonyms are sexist, xenophobe, bigot, Nazi, and fascist. So check out the Conservative Daily Store. Check out the leftist definition of racism t-shirt at the link in the description.
Hey, but we need to talk about this. Yesterday, we had 3 or 4 people call us and say, "Hey, I want to be a sponsor on your show." And I go, "Okay, what do you do?" And one of the calls that we got, and if you sell Amway, I'm all for you. But you called and said, "Hey, so I want you to promote me. I sell Amway." And I was like, "Yeah, that's not going to happen." And so, sorry, not that I don't want it to happen. It's not going to happen. But we. Yeah, I mean, I'm nothing against Amway, right? I think Amway is great, but
We're not really
Yeah,
in
we're not.
that business.
we're not in that.
And if we are going to get into multi-level marketing, we're going to be the ones at the top.
Yes,
of the
we're going to be
pyramid.
at the top of the pyramid. Let's create the top of the pyramid. Here we go. So I think, yeah, so we're going to be, over the next couple of weeks, probably doing more of these T-shirts, right, as we grow out and do the things in our store. But more importantly, we're going to be rolling out some new technology, Max, that we haven't even told people about, which will give people the ability inside of each state to talk to their fearless leaders, or fearful leaders. Fearful leaders.
Yeah.
So we're going to be doing some crazy stuff just because it's gotten so ridiculous that why not just join the party? Why not join the party? Let's be a little bit crazy and have a little bit of fun with it. Maybe we'll do fidget spinners that have Raz's face on it or something. No, we won't do that.
Yeah. Well, I want to pivot because I have a couple of cuts from this New York deal. I want to play again for anyone who's just joining the podcast now. And if you're just joining it now, definitely make sure you hit that share button. Facebook and YouTube don't like us when we make fun of people like Bill DeBlasio. They don't like people to actively be able to organically find this. So hit the share button. It really helps us as we grow, and check out the store as well. I want to play this.
So the share, we always wait till the very end to talk about the sharing. Share. Do it.
Well, yeah, we
already
wait
know
for
the
number of viewers to get up. But yeah.
Yeah, so we constantly have this discussion about how Facebook tries to suppress everything that we're doing. They suppress it. They try to block us. They suppress us. In the middle of our show, they will come on and say, in the middle of the show, say, hey, you can't actually do that content. They literally watch us.
You've been flagged for copyright content.
In the middle of the show. So by sharing it and then sharing it again and sharing it and sharing it and sharing it, we can break the algorithms and let Facebook know that, hey, we're not going to let the voice be suppressed, and that we're not going to let idiocy rule the day, which is what it's doing right now. Okay, go ahead, Max. Yeah. You're going.
So I want to go back to the clip of the Black Trans Power rally in New York from over the weekend, just so people can get a view for what it looks like when people are protesting for issues that the mayor agrees with. So let's go back to, what was that clip? That was cut 3.
I believe in our power. I believe in Black trans power. Thank you.
So that is what it looks like when you're protesting for something the mayor agrees with. This is, we talked about how Bill DeBlasio threatened to crack down on Jewish communities who are holding funerals. We showed how Bill DeBlasio was at a memorial service in New York, no mask, no social distancing, didn't care. This is what happened when the Jewish community in New York defied the mayor and decided to have their funeral anyway. Watch how the police were sent in to disperse them. Let's go to cut 7.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a
funeral and they light it up.
I think the clip was a little longer, but I guess it got shortened when I sent it over. It froze. So yeah, they sent the cops in, blaring, and they had in the loudspeakers, "This is an unlawful assembly. Disperse, disperse." They literally put more effort into stopping these Jewish people from having a funeral than they did to stop the looters and the rioters, than they did to stop the Black Trans Power, which, again, not going to get into that. I can't even understand how that's a thing. But they went out of their way to stop this Jewish community from having a funeral. And it's just so obviously discriminatory. It's so obviously discriminatory to say, no, it's still too dangerous for churches to have Sunday worship services. But you're all set if you want to go shoulder to shoulder and protest something that happened 1,000+ miles away from here. You're good to go.
So there was a time, Max, where the church, we go back in the day, right, when we had a moral compass, right? We had an ethical standard that we operated by, and typically that was done by churches, right? Not just church, but different faith, Muslims, Christians, Jews, right? And in 1963, I'm gonna read this to you, but in 1963. Martin Luther King was sitting, it was April 16th, 1963, he was sitting in the Birmingham, Alabama jail. Right? And he wrote a letter. And, I've been studying kind of what Martin Luther King has done and what he said over his lifetime. But this letter kind of shook me for a couple reasons. One of which is it talked about the fact that there's a complacency that happens, right? And who really has the voice to make change? And it's not protesters, and it's not people that have pink hair that want to start an autonomous zone. But one of the things that he said, which I think is interesting, is that the church was powerful. The church represented people that stood for moral value, that they weren't subjected to the thought of, oh, this might cost me $1. Right? There was no greedy incentives to it because they felt that they were doing God's work. Now, whether that's Allah, God, Yeshua, it didn't matter, right? What you called God, the 99 names of God, right? So let me read this part to you. And this is inside of his letter. And if you get a chance to read this letter holistically, we'll post it on.
Well, it's a very famous. It's a very famous letter, so it's very, very easy to find. Anyone who wants to.
It's very famous, but we stopped teaching about civics. We stopped teaching about real history, right? So, and we've tried to whitewash history. But let me read this to you. There was a time when the church was very powerful, and in the time when the early Christians rejoiced at being deemed worthy to suffer for what they believed. In those days, the church was not merely a thermometer that recorded the ideas and principles of popular opinion. It was a thermometer that transformed the mores of society. Whenever the early Christians entered a town, the people in power became disturbed and immediately sought to convict the Christians for being disturbers of the peace and outside agitators. But the Christians pressed on, and the conviction that they were a, quote-unquote, a colony of heaven, called to obey God rather than man. Small in numbers, they were big in commitment. They were too God-intoxicated to be astronomically intimidated. By their effort and example, they brought an end to such ancient evils as infanticide and gladiatorial contest. Things are different now. So often the contemporary church is a weak, ineffectual voice with an uncertain sound. So often it is the arch defender of the status quo. Far from being disturbed by the presence of the church, the power structure of the average community is consoled by the church's silent and often vocal sanction of things as they are. But the judgment of God is upon the church as never before. If today's church does not recapture the sacrificial spirit of the early church, it will lose its authenticity, forfeit the loyalty of millions, and be dismissed as an irrelevant social club with no meaning for the 20th century. Every day I meet young men whose disappointment with the church has turned into outright disgust. So, as I read that to you, and I don't want to get into, the fact that I think that he's a fortune teller, but what's eerie to me, Max, is that the police come into a church, come into a funeral, like a place that they're worshiping the loss of a rabbi, a very popular rabbi, and they were allowed to cause a disruption to that because the church says, fear of loss, fear of loss. We've lost our courage. We've actually, the church, and the last part of that is that young people are disappointed with the church has turned to outright disgust. Tell me that's not happening today. Tell me that young people aren't running away from the church because they don't take a stand. They don't do the one thing that these clowns in Seattle are doing, and that is they're standing up. What are they standing up for? They're standing up for whatever they can see that they can stand up for. That, hey, at least they have courage. You have people saying that. At least they're standing up for something.
Yeah.
There's no example that is being set on what we should be or should not be standing up for. So the more I read, the more I go, man, you can't help but just be saddened by the fact that the church makes their decisions on what they support and don't support. The fact that they've let this pandemic rule them so they can't feed their flock, all on the idea that they might lose donations. Why not have courage? What happened to courage? When did courage become such a bad thing, Max? When did standing up for things that are important, when did that get thrown out the window and said, just don't say anything. Don't say anything. We don't want to hurt their feelings.
We saw it, a week and a half ago when Donald Trump and Melania Trump went to visit the shrine for John Paul II in Washington, D.C. And that was a trip that they had actually planned out for weeks. A lot of people don't know this. Melania Trump is a Catholic. She is the first Catholic to live in the White House since John F. Kennedy. she really wanted to go visit that shrine. It had been in the works for weeks. Right as they're about to go, the archbishop, I think it was the archbishop for the Catholic Church in Washington, D.C., condemned President Trump for going to visit it. He had known about this for weeks, right? This has been in the work for weeks. The president doesn't go somewhere without it being planned out. They known about it for weeks, but they condemned the president for it. The reason that they don't have courage, they believe that they have courage. They believe not just that archbishop, but other pastors. You look at the bishop who was over the St. John's Church in D.C. that got torched, condemned the president for going to visit it and having a moment of silence in front of it. Condemned him for it. They believe that they have courage. These leftist church leaders believe that they have courage by standing up to President Trump. They don't care about the fact that their doors have been forced closed. They only care about speaking what they call truth to power. So they believe that they have courage.
There is no truth to power. By the way, let me give this to our listeners to consider, right? I wanted to give this to you to consider. Consider this. Do you ever think that leadership on the left that is holistically 100% not behind him, and leadership that on the right to stand up against Trump have something to lose if he continues down this path of taking away things, these projects overseas, and China's ability to maintain a huge deficit, and the NAFTA free trade agreement that he redid in order to give the U.S. More influence and or a more equitable environment.
Make it competitive again.
Do you think that they have something to lose? People that have been in power for decades, I want you to consider this. You can say, I don't like Trump. Maybe you don't like the way he talks because he's not a politician. He's not polished. He hasn't learned the game, the art of talking out of one side of your mouth, but doing something out of the other. He hasn't learned it, right? He's not polished. He is completely unpolished. Matter of fact, he's kind of an a-hole sometimes. And we all admit it. Somebody should take away his Twitter account sometimes. But then why would you? Because he is literally holding people to task on both sides of the aisle and saying, I've had enough. And by the way, in 50 years, the guy's done more for different communities as a philanthropist, never been called a racist. All of a sudden he runs for president as a conservative, and now he's a racist. Come on.
No one called him a racist when he got an award. What was it, from Jesse Jackson alongside Rosa Parks? They never called him a racist then.
I just think
he's only a racist when he ran as a Republican.
I just think that, look, we have all done things in our life that we regret. We've all said things in our life that we regret. And frankly, there are things that we have that, I mean, I don't keep skeletons because I like to talk about them because it's therapeutic for me. But people hide things about themselves while they actually, scream and yell at other people. President Trump and all the things that he's done for America, he is resetting things. He's resetting. He's resetting. He's moving people's stuff. He's telling politicians you no longer have a free for all.
You mentioned how the people in power have a lot to lose by Trump putting his policies through. And again, if someone disagrees with Trump, doesn't like him, that's fine. But realize that the fake news you're being peddled is from corporations that have interests that they disagree with the president on. I mean, look at right now. You have Nancy Pelosi trying to convince Republicans to pass an amnesty bill. The Supreme Court, in just a matter of days, is going to come down and decide whether Obama's DACA amnesty was legal and constitutional or not. If they decide that it isn't, big business, the corporate donors of the GOP, want them to make that amnesty permanent. They want that access to low-skill, low-pay labor at a time when we have more Americans unemployed than ever before. There is a wing of the Republican Party fighting to give more work permits to illegal aliens.
Right. But they
don't care about us. They care about their corporate donors.
And I can't get it through people's mind. I can't get it through your skull. They don't care about us. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. And President Trump is he's 74 years old. He's lived
74.
Nearly 3/4 of a century, right? He knows that his time is limited. He knows maybe I got another 10 years. He doesn't need money. He doesn't need authority. He's just saying, you know what? It's screwed up enough, and I've seen enough, and I've contributed to this system enough that I just want to change it. I want my legacy to be giving back the American people things that they don't have, that they don't even realize they don't have. You don't have any freedom. You don't have anything. And by the way, if they cared about us, damn it, if they cared about us, why are drug companies writing our bills? Why? Why aren't they in our community saying, hey, what do you need? What do you guys really need? They don't address the problems. You elect them. They tell you they're going to give you all the soda in the machine in the lunchroom, right, and give you access to the teacher's lounge. You believe them. Then when you don't get access to it, they blame and say, oh, you know what? It's the fact they've screwed this thing up so badly in their 12th term. That's I need to be here so I can straighten it out. Well, you had 12 chances to straighten it out. You didn't straighten shit out. How's that?
Oh, now I have to add the the cursing
then
disclaimer
add it.
when we
Then add it.
up.
I'm
Good
done.
job,
I'm
Joe.
done. Max, it pisses me off. It pisses me off that as Americans we're treated like children. We get chastised like children. Look, and then we want to yell at the police. We want to concentrate on them. They're not the problem. The problem is the people that tell the police what to do. That's the mayors. And by the way, if you want to know the biggest offenders, they're Democrats. Demorats. That's what they are. They run places like Chicago, right? And Minneapolis, where this happened. Minneapolis,
LA, New York, Boston. In Boston, they're going to remove a statue of Lincoln freeing the slaves. There's a statue in Boston of Abraham Lincoln reaching out his hand to a freed black child who was being freed from slavery. That statue was paid for almost exclusively by the earnings of freed slaves. They pulled together their resources, paid for a statue to commemorate Abraham Lincoln freeing the slaves.
Right.
Boston now wants to remove the statue for being racist. How can a statue paid for by freed slaves commemorating the freeing of the slaves be racist? It makes absolutely no sense.
No, it doesn't make sense, but they don't know history either. They don't know history. They don't know anything about history. Look, we have a 22-year-old little punk that works with a Denver school board, right? 22-year-old. He runs the Denver school board. The schools in Denver, the high schools, don't have air conditioning. The STEM school does. Most of the schools, high schools, don't have air conditioning. And you know what his concentration is? We need to change the name of a town, Stapleton, right? We need to change that town, and if they don't, there's going to be hell to pay. That's literally what they said. He said, with his hat on backwards. I can't even fathom the fact that he ignores what's really going on in Denver, right? But wants to concentrate on something over here, like, oh, shiny object. Oh, we got to go fix that. You need to change your name because that person was associated with the Ku Klux Klan. You know what? If that's the biggest problem, if that's your win, you're busy over there doing that when you can't even take care of your community because you don't care. These political leaders just don't care. They are sociopaths. We are dealing with an entire class of sociopaths that care about nothing but themselves. And they're feeding themselves while everyone else goes hungry. And that's what we're facing, Max, on both sides. That's on both sides.
So I did research it because when you were talking about in the other podcast about schools not having air conditioning. Yeah. And when you go around the country, it's actually very common for any school that's older than 10, 20 years. Mm-hmm. Schools typically didn't have air conditioning. That's why you have summer vacation. Right. And you send people home before it gets too hot.
Actually, that was done for a different reason, but I get it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like 40% of the schools in Hawaii don't have air conditioning either, and it's not because of systemic racism. It's because they just don't have air conditioning, right? In New York's spending $29 million to add air conditioning to schools that don't have them, not because of racism, just because the school buildings are very, very old.
You can put in-window air conditioning. That does happen. In-window air conditioners. Look, we can engineer a spaceship to go to the moon. We can do that, right? 50 years ago, 60 years ago. I promise you can figure out how to put air conditioning in an old building. You can.
Yeah. Oh, you can. You can.
All right.
I mean,
why is
Milwaukee? Only 17% of the schools have air conditioning. In Baltimore, 55%.
There's an area.
It's around the country.
There's an area in Denver, by the way, where the dropout rate in that 3-4 square mile area is 83%. 83% in that area.
Oh yeah, no.
I mean,
We've talked about this. We've talked about in the past that the three things that you need to do, regardless of what race you are, if you want to enter the middle class, is graduate high school, not have a child out of wedlock, and get a job. If you do those three things, you have like a 95% chance of making it into the middle class. If you do all three of those things. And it's the same with so you got to graduate college, and you got to graduate high school. We'll have to do another episode on that because it's a really complicated issue. A lot of it stems back to not having strong parent figures in the home to force kids to stay with it and to fight with it and stay enrolled. We'll have to do another episode because we are running up against the end of the show. Any final thoughts, Joe?
Yeah, my final thought is that there's so much crazy going on in the world. We just got to solve one problem at a time and start slapping those people that actually create problems for us, right? Concentrate on the problems, not the symptoms. Look, it's courage. Courage is as infectious as fear. You all have to stand up and speak. It doesn't matter what people say. Speak.
Yeah,
that's it.
And my final word, Josh, if you can throw the picture. This episode is sponsored by the Conservative Daily Store.
Buy a T-shirt.
Conservative Daily Store. Link in the description of YouTube and the Facebook live stream. This T-shirt is one we're featuring today. The liberal definition of racist: anyone who defeats a liberal in a political argument. So check that out. Help support the channel. We really appreciate it. So again, my name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto.
Remember that you can download the podcast and subscribe on the Google Play Store as well as Apple Podcasts. You can find us on the Podbean app as well as conservative-daily.com/podcast. Do make sure you subscribe. If you want to watch a lot of these clips, if you're just listening by audio, we do have video on our live streams on Facebook and YouTube as well. So again, my name is Max McGuire. Thanks for Joe Otto for sitting in today. And remember that the fight to take back our country is not over, but the only way we win is if we all fight together.